There's a lot of crazy firearm myths that are still floating around out there, and you might even believe some of them. So today, here on Show Me Firearms, we're breaking down 5 insane firearm myths. Some of them are pretty wild, especially number 5. So be sure to stick around and let's dive in. All right, let's start with one of the most classic myths that you see from Hollywood. Somebody gets shot, right? And they're sent flying across the room, or they crash dramatically through a wall. Now, all this looks pretty darn cool, right? Yeah, except it's just pure Hollywood fiction. I know you're shocked. Now here's the deal. Some rounds are pretty darn powerful. Like take this PMC Bronze 44 Magnum 180 grain jacketed hollow point, for example. It's putting out about 1,200 foot-pounds of energy, which is, yeah, an insane amount of energy, but this still isn't gonna send the guy flying backward when he gets hit. And here's why. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Now, that's a basic physics principle that we're all familiar with. What it means is that if the target is receiving 1,200 foot-pounds of energy, that also means that 1,200 foot-pounds of energy is going backward in the opposite direction into the shooter. This is, of course, known as recoil. So that means if the guy who gets shot goes flying one direction, the guy who fired the round is going to go flying backward the other direction. But they never do. Why?
Wait, you're getting nervous, man. Calm down, it's okay.
Let's get deeper into this. The key to understanding why the guy doesn't go flying backward when he gets hit is surface area. A round of 44 Magnum is only about 0.44 inches in diameter. Like, that's smaller than the size of a penny. Now let's say you got hit by a car with the same 1,200 foot-pounds of energy. What do you think is gonna happen? Yeah, you're gonna go flying. Now, since the car is obviously way bigger than the 44 Magnum, it's got plenty of surface area to act upon to send you flying through the air. But when you take that energy and concentrate it down into something the size of a 44 Magnum, that energy is gonna get translated into penetration rather than a force that's able to pick you up and send you flying through the air. So next time you're watching an action flick and you see somebody get shot, they get sent flying, just remember it's pure Hollywood drama. It doesn't work that way in real life, no matter how big the round may be. If you've watched any World War II movie, you've undoubtedly heard that iconic ping sound from the M1 Garand when a spent clip gets ejected. The sound of that ping is practically legendary at this point, and as with any legend, myths are undoubtedly going to spring up around it, like the one that says that the ping got soldiers killed. Here's how the myth goes. The enemy would wait until they heard the sound of that ping, which told them that their opponent was out of ammo, and then they would rush in for the attack. Sounds like a pretty intense plot, right? Yeah, except in reality, this just doesn't hold up. First, let's talk about the chaos of battle. Like, you've got small arms fire, you've got machine guns rattling off, you've got explosions booming left and right, you've got guys yelling. The typical noise level in a World War II battle would range somewhere between 130 and 160 decibels, which is insanely loud. Like, we're talking about as loud as a 747 at takeoff power. Now, the M1 Garand's ping, on the other hand, well, it's relatively quiet by comparison, about 85 to 100 decibels or so, which is about as loud as a passing truck or a loud conversation. In a noise environment that's hitting upwards of 160 dB, there's just no way that the enemy is going to be able to pick out that one little pinging sound and go, oh, he's out of ammo, time to attack. And on top of that, let's consider the M1's reload time. The average rifleman could reload his Garand in about 2 to 4 seconds or so. So unless the enemy is within like 50 feet or so, there's no way he's going to be able to charge in, cover all that ground before the rifleman has a chance to reload his weapon and get back in the fight. Plus, you would expect that guys would naturally be keeping their heads down while they're reloading their M1s, so the chances of the enemy scoring a kill shot on him while he's reloading are, at least in theory, lower because he should be behind cover. So when you hear that ping in the movies, just remember, it's all a myth. The M1 Garand's ping didn't get soldiers killed. This is just more Hollywood fiction than actual reality out on the battlefield. Guns just going off on their own. This myth is about as absurd as it gets, yet somehow a lot of people still seem to believe it. But here's the truth. Guns just don't go off on their own. The trigger has to be pulled. Simple as that. Modern firearms, like say the Glock 17 or Smith & Wesson M&P 40, for example, come with multiple layers of safeties built right in, okay? You've got things like trigger safeties, drop safeties, striker block safeties, and the chances of these multiple layers of safeties all failing all at once is like a 1 in a million, okay? It's just practically impossible. And if we're talking about an older design, like say the 1911, for example, you still got a manual safety and a grip safety. So what it boils down to is that guns just don't go off on their own, okay? The trigger has to be pulled. So for those who still believe this myth for some reason, just remember, it's all about treating every gun as if it were loaded and keeping your finger off of that trigger. Hollywood is notorious for adding ridiculous sound effects that make absolutely no sense, especially when we're talking about firearms. Take the sound of a slide being racked on a handgun, for example. In a lot of movies, you hear this sound when nobody's even touching the slide. Now, how many times have you seen guys like Jason Bourne or some other action hero, right? He picks up a handgun and you hear the sound of the slide being racked, but he doesn't actually rack the slide. Now, even if you're CIA super soldier Jason Bourne, I'm sorry, but you still gotta manually rack your slide yourself, just like the rest of us, because it's not gonna do it for you on its own just because you're Jason Bourne. And then there's that click, 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 clickety click sound. You know, the one where the hero, he runs out of ammo and we hear the clicking sound over and over again? Sounds pretty scary, doesn't it? Yeah, but here's the deal. When your semi-automatic handgun runs out of ammo, your slide is gonna lock to the rear. Obviously, your trigger is locked up. There's no physical way possible for this gun to make that click, 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 click sound in this configuration. It's just not gonna happen. Now, I get it, Hollywood is trying to ramp up the tension and they're using that clicking sound effect to tell the audience, especially people who aren't familiar with guns, that the hero's out of ammo and he's in a bad spot. If you want this, fine, but at least give him a revolver so that way the clicking noise at least makes sense. In the movies, we often see our action heroes running around with a machine gun, unleashing suppressing fire non-stop. The gun never runs out of ammo and the barrel never overheats. This is just pure Hollywood fiction. In reality, machine guns should be fired in short, controlled bursts, because if you just hold the trigger down and spray lead everywhere, you're gonna be putting that lead on everything except for your target, and it's not gonna take you very long before you overheat your gun, which is gonna cause some major headaches for our action hero. Take guns like the MG42 and M249, for example. They're equipped with quick change barrel systems for a very good reason, because these guns get extremely hot during sustained firing, and if you didn't have a way of quickly swapping out your barrels, you're going to be melting them down right and left. Overheating any firearm is extremely dangerous, because when your barrel gets too hot, you can actually cause rounds to cook off. What that means is the round actually explodes while it's still in the chamber due to the extreme heat. Rounds cooking off is extremely unpredictable and can severely damage the gun or even cause injury to the shooter depending on the severity of the failure. And let's talk about the whole infinite ammo thing. Just because you got a machine gun doesn't mean you have an endless supply of ammunition. A typical ammo belt will hold about 100 to 200 rounds or so, and yeah, you can of course link multiple belts together, but that's not going to be very practical if you want to be like Rambo with your M60 and you got a 12-foot long ammo belt behind you. Machine guns are pretty darn powerful weapons, right? But they're definitely not magic, okay? You still got to be disciplined in your fire control, you got to keep them cool, and you got to keep them well fed with their favorite type of ammunition. Now, are there any other firearm myths that you would add to this list? Let me know in a comment down below.